I stood frozen in the bank, staring at a number that couldn't be real, $5,148. 40 years of sweat, sacrifice, and trust, and this was all I had left? My heart pounded as the truth clawed its way up. The money I'd earned, my money, was gone, stolen by the one person I trusted most. I thought I knew him, but I was wrong. Welcome to the Betrayal Revenge channel, where stories come alive through voices you've never heard told this way before. Join me on this journey to uncover the truth and reclaim justice, one step at a time. It all began on the day I retired, a crisp Ohio afternoon I'll never forget. The air smelled of fresh paper and coffee as I stepped out of the office for the last time. My desk, once buried under files and sticky notes, was now bare, save for a small card from my coworkers. To Judith, enjoy the freedom. I smiled, tucking it into my purse. After 40 years at the firm, I felt like a bird finally slipping its cage. No more 6 a.m. alarms, no more late-night emails. Just me, Richard, and the life we'd always promised ourselves. I drove through our quiet Ohio suburb, the maple trees glowing gold in the October light. My hands were light on the wheel, my mind already drifting to dreams I'd shelved for decades. Maybe a trip to Hawaii, the ocean breeze on my skin, or Venice, gliding through canals under a pink sunset. Richard deserved it too, after all our years of pinching pennies, saving for this moment. I could see us now, laughing over wine, no worries left to carry. I stopped at the bank on impulse. The glass doors hissed open, and the cool air inside brushed my cheeks. I slid my card into the ATM, my fingers tingling with excitement. I wanted to see it, the nest egg we'd built, the reward for a lifetime of work. I'd never been one to check the accounts. Richard handled that, always saying, "Let me take care of it, Jude. You just focus on you." And I trusted him. Why wouldn't I? He was my husband, my partner, the man who'd held my hand through every storm. The screen flickered, and the numbers appeared. $5,148. I blinked, my breath catching. That couldn't be right. My chest tightened as I stared at the screen, willing the digits to shift, to show the hundreds of thousands we'd saved. I logged out and tried again, my fingers fumbling. The same number glared back, cold and unyielding. This isn't possible. I'd worked my whole life, grueling hours, skipped vacations, every paycheck funneled into our joint account. We weren't rich, but we were careful, frugal. We had a plan. Where was it all? My legs felt heavy as I walked to the teller's counter. The young woman behind it, Katie, her name tag read, gave me a polite smile. "Can I help you, ma'am?" "There's a mistake," I said, my voice thinner than I meant it to be. "My account, it's almost empty." Katie's smile faltered as she typed. The clack of her keyboard filled the silence, each tap like a hammer on my nerves. Her brow furrowed and she glanced up, her eyes soft with something like pity. "Mrs. Judith, there's no error. This account has had automatic withdrawals of $2,050 every month for quite some time." Her words hit like a slap. "Quite some time?" I echoed, my mouth dry. "Since when?" She hesitated, her fingers hovering over the keys. "It looks like over 30 years. 30 years. My mind reeled, the room tilting slightly. 30 years of my life, my labor drained away without a trace. And I hadn't known. How could I not have known? Katie printed a statement, sliding it across the counter like it was fragile. I stared at the rows of numbers, each withdrawal a tiny betrayal, stretching back to when Ethan was just a baby. My hands shook as I folded the paper, the edges biting into my palms. "Is there anything else I can do?" Katie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I shook my head, unable to speak. The bank's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, too bright, too loud. I walked out into the parking lot, the autumn air now sharp against my skin. The dreams of Hawaii and Venice dissolved like smoke. All I could see was that number, 5,048, and the question burning in my gut. That night, I didn't sleep. The house was too quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your ears until it hums. I sat at the kitchen table, the bank statement spread out before me, its numbers glaring under the dim glow of the pendant light. $2,150, withdrawn every month for 30 years. The math didn't lie, but my heart refused to accept it. How could I have been so blind? The coffee in my mug had gone cold, its bitter scent mixing with the faint must of old wood in our Ohio home. Richard was upstairs snoring softly, oblivious to the storm brewing in my chest. I'd always trusted him with our finances. He'd insisted on it, saying it was his way of taking care of us. I'd let him, thinking it was love, not control. Now, each line on that statement felt like a crack in the life we'd built, or the life I thought we'd built. I pushed the statement aside and pulled out a box of old records from the study. Richard was meticulous, always had been. Every receipt, every bill, every bank statement from the past 4 decades neatly filed in his cramped handwriting. I used to tease him about it, calling him my accountant in shining armor. Now, the irony burned. The clock ticked past midnight as I sifted through the papers. My fingers trembled, not from the chill in the air, but from the dread curling in my stomach. I found the first statement from 30 years ago, yellowed and brittle. There it was, $500 withdrawn, labeled simply, D. Rose, allowance. The next month, another $500, then $600. Over the years, the amounts crept higher, $1,000, $2,000, until they settled at $2,150 a decade ago. Never a missed payment, never a note of explanation beyond those 3 cryptic words. D. Rose. The name clawed at me, unfamiliar yet heavy, like a stone lodged in my throat. Who was she? A colleague? A charity case? A debt I'd never been told about? My mind spun, grasping for answers that didn't come. I leaned back in the chair, the wood creaking under my weight, and stared at the ceiling. The fan spun lazily, casting shadows that danced across the walls. Each turn felt like another question I couldn't answer. I thought of Richard's late nights at the office, his vague excuses about errands on weekends, the way he'd brush off my questions about our savings with a smile and a, "Don't worry, Jude, it's all under control." I'd believed him. I'd wanted to believe him. But now, those moments replayed in my mind, each one tinged with a new bitter edge. Had he been lying to me all along? Or worse, had I been lying to myself, ignoring the signs because I didn't want to see them? The statements piled up around me, a paper trail of betrayal stretching back to when Ethan was in diapers. I remembered the sacrifices, skipping dinners out, mending clothes instead of buying new ones, telling myself it was for our future. Richard had always been the frugal one, insisting we save, save, save. I'd trusted his vision, his promises of a comfortable retirement. But while I was cutting coupons, someone else was living off my labor. I closed my eyes, the weight of it pressing against my ribs. The kitchen smelled faintly of the lemon cleaner I'd used that morning, a sharp contrast to the chaos in my head. I could still hear Richard's voice, calm and reassuring, telling me to let him handle things. I'd given him my trust, my life's work, my dreams. And now I was holding proof that he'd given it to someone else. My gaze fell back to the statement, to those 3 letters. D. Rose. They weren't just a name, they were a key, a secret I'd been locked out of for 30 years. And as the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, painting the room in soft gray, I made a decision. I wasn't going to stay in the dark any longer. D. Rose. Those 3 letters haunted me, looping through my mind like a song I couldn't shake. They were inked on every statement, a ghost from a past I didn't know I'd shared. I sat in the study, the bank records strewn across Richard's desk, their edges curling in the dim light of the desk lamp. The air smelled of dust and old paper, heavy with secrets I was only beginning to unravel. Who was she? The question burned, sharp and relentless, but I wasn't the same woman who'd trusted blindly for decades. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to wait for Richard to hand them to me. I hired a private investigator the next morning. His name was Tom, a gruff man with a handshake like iron and eyes that missed nothing. I met him at a diner on the edge of town, the kind of place where the coffee was strong and the booths smelled faintly of grease. I slid the bank statements across the sticky table, my voice low but steady. "Find out who D. Rose is," I said, "and where my money's been going." Tom nodded, his pen scratching notes as I spoke. He didn't ask questions, didn't offer pity, just took the papers and promised results. As I left, the bell above the diner door jingled, sharp against the hum of my thoughts. I felt a flicker of control for the first time since the bank. Days passed, each one heavier than the last. I moved through the house like a stranger, cooking meals I barely ate, smiling at Richard when he came home from his errands. His voice was the same, warm, familiar, asking about my day as if nothing had changed. But I noticed things now, the way his eyes darted when I mentioned the bank, the quick change of subject when I asked about our savings. Every word felt like a performance, and I was done being his audience. The photos arrived a week later, delivered in a plain manila envelope that felt heavier than it should. I waited until Richard was out, the house silent except for the faint tick of the grandfather clock in the hall. My hands shook as I opened it, the paper crinkling under my fingers. The first image stole my breath. Richard, my Richard, standing on a porch 2 hours from our home, a pizza box in his hands, and a smile I hadn't seen in years. He looked younger, lighter, like a man unburdened. The house behind him was modest but well kept, with flowers in the window boxes and a tricycle on the lawn. Then I saw her, a woman, mid-50s with auburn hair and a laugh that seemed to carry through the photo. She stood in the doorway, one hand on her hip, her eyes locked on Richard with an intimacy that made my stomach churn. And beside her, a young man, maybe 30, the same age as Ethan, grinning as he took the pizza from Richard's hands. They looked like a family I didn't belong to. Tom's report was clipped to the photos, his handwriting blunt and precise. D. Rose, Dahlia Rose, 54, resident of Canton, Ohio. Single, one son, Jacob, 31. House purchased 25 years ago via Home Nest Holdings, co-signed by Richard and Judith Carter. My name on their home, my money in their walls, my life, funding theirs. Dahlia. The name hit like a punch. I hadn't heard it in decades, but it came rushing back. Richard's old friend from before we met, the one he'd once loved, or so he'd confessed in a fleeting moment of vulnerability. "It was nothing, Jude," he'd said, brushing it off. "Just a silly crush." I'd believed him, buried it in the haze of our early years together. But now, staring at her face, I saw the truth. She wasn't a memory. She was a constant, woven into our marriage like a shadow I'd never noticed. My chest tightened, a mix of rage and grief so raw it stole my breath. I pressed a hand to my mouth, stifling the sob that threatened to escape. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in, the air thick with the scent of ink and betrayal. 30 years. My savings, my sacrifices, funneled to her son, to a life Richard had chosen over ours. I slid the photos back into the envelope, my movements slow, deliberate. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. But something shifted inside me, a spark catching on dry tinder. I thought of Dahlia's smile, Richard's ease, the home they'd built with my money. They thought I was invisible, a fool who'd never looked too closely. They were wrong. I tucked the envelope into a drawer, locking it with a key I kept close. The fire in me wasn't loud, not yet. It was quiet, steady, growing with every breath. I wasn't ready to confront Richard, not until I knew everything. But one thing was certain. I was done being their pawn. The envelope with Dahlia's photo sat locked in my desk drawer, its weight heavier than the paper inside. Every time I passed the study, I felt it calling, a silent accusation of the life I'd unknowingly funded. I wanted to scream, to tear the truth from Richard's lips, but I held back. Anger alone wouldn't get my money back. I needed proof, a plan, something solid to stand on. What else had he stolen from me? The question gnawed at my bones, sharper with each passing day. I booked an appointment with a lawyer the following week. Her name was Margaret Klein, a woman with steel gray hair and a gaze that cut through nonsense. Her office in downtown Columbus smelled of polished wood and fresh ink. the kind of place where secrets went to be dissected. I sat across from her, the manila envelope in my lap, my fingers tracing its edges as if it might burn me. The city hummed outside, cars honking, a distant siren. But inside, the air was still, heavy with the weight of what I was about to uncover. "Tell me everything," Margaret said, her voice calm but commanding. She leaned forward, her pen poised over a legal pad, ready to catch every detail. I started with the bank statement, the $5,148 that had shattered my world. Then the withdrawals, $2,150 every month for 30 years, siphoned to Dahlia Rose. I slid the investigator's report across the desk, the photos of Richard, Dahlia, and her son spilling out like a confession. My voice stayed steady, but my hands betrayed me, trembling as I pointed to the name on the house deed. Homenest Holdings, co-signed by Richard and Judith Carter. My name, tied to a home I'd never seen for a woman I'd never truly known. Margaret's eyes narrowed as she scanned the documents, her pen scratching notes in sharp, precise strokes. The room felt smaller with every page she turned, the air thick with the scent of her lavender perfume and the faint metallic tang of the coffee machine in the corner. I stared at a crack in the leather armrest of my chair, my mind drifting to the early days with Richard. We'd been so young, so sure of each other. I remembered the way he'd slip his hand into mine during walks in the Ohio dusk, promising a future we'd build together. Had that been a lie too, or had something changed, turning the man I loved into a stranger who'd bleed me dry? "Judith," Margaret said, pulling me back. Her voice was firm, grounding. "This is serious. The house, the accounts, the withdrawals, they're all tied to you, but the signatures—" She tapped a document, her nail clicking against the paper. "Richard forged your name on the Homenest Holdings paperwork. That's fraud, plain and simple." Fraud. The word landed like a stone in my chest. I'd trusted him with our finances, our future, our life, and he'd turned that trust into a weapon. My throat tightened, but I swallowed the ache, forcing my voice to stay even. "Can I get it back? The money, the house, everything?" Margaret leaned back, her chair creaking softly. "We can sue for financial fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. The forged signatures give us a strong case. The house, the accounts, we can argue they were funded with your earnings, your assets. It won't be quick, but it's winnable." She paused, her eyes softening. "You're entitled to every cent, Judith, and more." I nodded, the words sinking in. Winnable, entitled. They were lifelines, but they didn't erase the betrayal. I thought of Dahlia's smile in those photos, the ease in Richard's posture as he stood on her porch. They'd built a life on my labor, my sacrifices. Every time I'd skipped a new dress to save for our future, every late night I'd worked to secure our retirement, they'd been there, reaping the rewards. The thought twisted in my gut, a mix of rage and shame. How had I let this happen? How had I been so blind? Margaret gathered the papers, her movements brisk. "I'll start drafting the paperwork. We'll need to move quickly to freeze any further transactions. In the meantime, don't confront Richard. Not yet. We need to keep the element of surprise." I agreed, though every fiber of me screamed to storm home and demand answers. As I left her office, the autumn air hit my face, crisp and sharp with the scent of fallen leaves. The city bustled around me, people rushing to lunch, a street vendor calling out, but I felt detached, like I was watching it all through glass. My reflection in a shop window caught my eye, a woman in her 60s, lines etched around her eyes, her shoulders squared despite the weight she carried. I barely recognized her. Not the naive wife who'd trusted Richard, but someone new, someone ready to fight. Back home, I moved through the house with a quiet purpose. Richard was out, probably at one of his meetings that now felt like lies. I stood in the kitchen, the afternoon light slanting through the blinds, painting stripes across the linoleum floor. The room smelled of the bread I'd baked that morning, a habit I'd kept to ground myself. I ran my fingers over the countertop, smooth and cool, and thought of the years I'd spent here, cooking for a family I thought was mine. Ethan's laughter as a boy, Claire's shy smiles when she joined us, Noah's sticky fingers reaching for cookies. Had it all been a facade, propped up by my ignorance? I opened the drawer where I'd hidden the investigator's report, the envelope's edges now soft from my touch. I didn't need to look at the photos again. They were burned into my mind. But I pulled out the deed to Dahlia's house, my name glaring back at me. Judith Carter. A signature I hadn't written, a life I hadn't chosen. My heart pounded, not with fear, but with resolve. 30 years of blindness was enough. I wasn't just fighting for money, I was fighting for myself. As I locked the drawer, the front door clicked open. Richard's voice called out, warm and casual. "Jude, you home?" My pulse spiked, but I steadied my breath, slipping the key into my pocket. I wasn't ready to face him, not yet, but when I did, it would be on my terms. The house was too still, the kind of quiet that feels like it's holding its breath. I sat in the living room, the laptop open on the coffee table, its screen glowing with the evidence I'd gathered. Bank statements, the investigator's photos, the forged deed to Dahlia's house. The air smelled faintly of the lavender candle I'd lit to steady my nerves, but it did little to ease the storm inside me. Richard would be home soon, and this time I wasn't going to let him dodge the truth. What would he say when he saw it all laid bare? I'd spent days preparing, each moment sharpening my resolve. The lawyer's words echoed in my mind. Don't confront him yet. But I couldn't wait. The weight of 30 years of lies was crushing me, and I needed to see his face when the mask came off. I adjusted the laptop, angling it so the screen would be the first thing he saw. My hands were steady now, the trembling replaced by a cold, focused anger. The room was dim, the late afternoon sun filtering through the curtains, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. Every creak of the house felt like a countdown. The front door opened, and Richard's familiar shuffle filled the hall. "Jude, I'm home," he called, his voice light, as if this were just another evening. My heart thudded, but I stayed silent, my eyes fixed on the doorway. He stepped into the living room, his coat still on, a faint smile on his lips, until he saw the laptop. The smile vanished, his face paling as his gaze locked on the screen. The photos of him and Dahlia stared back, undeniable, next to the bank statements and the deed with my forged signature. What is this?" he stammered, his voice cracking. His eyes darted to me, wide with panic, like a cornered animal. I stood, my movements slow, deliberate. The lavender scent clung to the air, mixing with the faint musk of his cologne. "Sit down, Richard," I said, my voice low, colder than I'd ever heard it. "We need to talk." He hesitated, his hands twitching at his sides, then sank onto the couch, his eyes flicking between me and the screen. "Jude, this isn't what you think." "Don't." I cut him off, my tone sharp enough to slice through his excuses. I pointed to the laptop, my finger steady. 30 years, $2,950 every month, to Dahlia Rose, a house in her name, bought with my money, with my signature forged. Explain it, Richard. Now. His mouth opened, then closed, his throat bobbing as he swallowed. For a moment he looked old, frail, the lines on his face deeper under the lamplight. But I didn't feel pity. I felt fire. "Judith," he finally said, his voice softer, pleading. "Don't make this bigger than it is. Dahlia, she's just an old friend. She was struggling alone with her son. I was only helping her, that's all." Helping her. The words landed like a slap, each one dripping with condescension. I laughed, a short, bitter sound that echoed in the quiet room. Helping her? With my money? For 30 years? You think I'm that stupid, Richard? I stepped closer, my shadow falling across him. I worked my whole life for us, for our future. I trusted you. And you turned me into an ATM for your old friend. He flinched, his hands gripping the edge of the couch. "Jude, you're blowing this out of proportion. I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't want you to worry. Dahlia had no one else." "No one else?" My voice rose, sharp and unyielding. "What about me? What about Ethan, our son? What about the family you promised to build with me? Or was that all a lie too?" My chest heaved. the rage I'd held back for days spilling out. I thought of the nights I'd stayed up worrying about bills, the vacations we never took, the dreams I'd buried to save for our retirement, all while he funneled my earnings to another woman. Richard leaned forward, his hands raised as if to calm me. "Judith, please, let's talk about this. We can work it out, I swear. It's not what you think." His voice was smooth now, the tone he used to charm his way out of arguments, but it didn't work anymore. I saw through it, through him. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the divorce papers Margaret had prepared, dropping them onto the coffee table with a soft thud. The sound felt final, like a door slamming shut. "We're done, Richard," I said, my voice steady again, cold as ice. "This isn't a discussion. It's the end." His eyes widened, his face crumpling as he stared at the papers. "Jude, no. You can't mean that. After all these years." He reached for my hand, but I stepped back, out of his reach. The air between us crackled with tension, the lavender candle flickering on the table. 30 years, I said, my words slow, deliberate. "That's how long you betrayed me. You don't get to beg now." I turned, walking toward the stairs, my footsteps echoing in the silent house. His voice followed, desperate, but I didn't look back. "Judith, please, we can fix this." I paused at the base of the stairs, my hand on the banister, the wood cool under my palm. "Fix it?" I said, not turning around. "You broke it, Richard, and I'm not cleaning up your mess anymore." As I climbed the stairs, the weight of the confrontation settled over me, not relief, not yet, but a strange clarity. I'd faced him, seen the truth flicker in his eyes, but this was only the beginning. Dahlia was still out there, living in a house built with my money, smiling in photos I'd paid for. She thought she'd won. She was wrong. The confrontation with Richard left a chill in the house, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the betrayal. I moved through the days like a ghost, my mind replaying his excuses, his pleading eyes, the divorce papers still untouched on the coffee table. But Richard was only half the equation. Dahlia, her name burned in my thoughts, a wound that wouldn't close. She wasn't just a shadow in my marriage. She was the architect of its ruin. What kind of woman builds a life on another's sacrifice? I needed to see her, to look into the eyes of the woman who'd taken so much from me. I arranged the meeting through Richard, my voice flat as I told him to set it up. He hesitated, mumbling about keeping things calm, but I didn't give him a choice. "Do it," I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. The call was made, and Dahlia agreed, too quickly, I thought, as if she'd been waiting for this moment. Her eagerness set my nerves on edge, like the hum of a wire about to snap. What was she playing at? The drive to Canton was 2 hours, the Ohio countryside blurring past in a haze of golden fields and graying barns. The air inside the car smelled of leather and the faint peppermint of the gum I chewed to steady myself. My hands gripped the wheel, knuckles pale, as I rehearsed what I'd say. I didn't want her apologies or her tears. I wanted answers. I wanted her to see me, not as Richard's wife, but as the woman who'd funded her life for 30 years. Her house was exactly as it looked in the photos. Modest, with white siding and a neatly trimmed lawn. The flower boxes under the windows bloomed with geraniums, their red petals too cheerful for the moment. I parked across the street, my heart thudding as I gathered the folder of evidence. Bank statements, the forged deed, the investigator's report. The papers crinkled in my hands, their weight grounding me as I stepped out into the crisp autumn air. The neighborhood was quiet, the only sound a distant lawnmower and the faint rustle of leaves skittering across the pavement. Dahlia opened the door before I could knock, her smile wide and polished, like she was greeting an old friend. "Judith," she said, her voice bright, almost musical. "Finally we meet properly. Come in, please." She wore a cream sweater and jeans, her auburn hair swept back, her makeup subtle but deliberate. She looked younger than her 54 years, her movements graceful as she gestured me inside. The house smelled of vanilla and fresh laundry, a warmth that felt stolen, built on my dime. I stepped inside, my shoes clicking on the hardwood floor. The living room was cozy, with a plush sofa and framed photos on the mantel, her son Jacob, at various ages, but none of Richard. A deliberate omission, I noted, or perhaps a taunt. I sat on the edge of the sofa, the folder in my lap, my posture rigid. Dahlia settled across from me, her legs crossed, her smile unwavering. "I'm so glad you're here," she said, leaning forward. "I've wanted to clear up any misunderstandings." Misunderstandings. The word was a spark to dry tinder. I didn't smile back. "There's no misunderstanding," I said, my voice low, controlled. I opened the folder and spread the evidence across the coffee table. The bank statements, the deed, the photos of her and Richard laughing on this very porch. 30 years, Dahlia. My money, my signature, my life. Used to build this. I gestured to the room, my hand steady despite the fire in my chest. "Explain that." Her smile faltered just for a moment, her eyes flicking to the papers. Then she recovered, her expression softening into something almost pitying. "Judith, I never meant to hurt you," she said, her voice smooth, practiced. "Richard told me the money was his to give. I thought he was helping me out of kindness. I'm a single mother, you know. Jacob's had medical bills, school fees." She trailed off, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, her hands clasped in her lap. I stared at her, my jaw tight. The performance was flawless, vulnerable, sincere, the perfect victim. But I saw the calculation behind it, the way her fingers twitched, the slight tilt of her head. She was playing me, just as she'd played Richard for decades. "Don't," I said, my voice cutting through her act. "You knew exactly where that money came from. You knew it was mine, and you took it anyway." The air shifted, the warmth of the room turning brittle. Dahlia's smile vanished, her eyes narrowing as the mask slipped. She leaned back, her posture sharp, her voice dropping its sweetness. "You think you can just waltz in here and take it all back?" she said, her tone laced with scorn. "Richard chose to help me, Judith. He chose me. You were too busy playing the perfect wife to notice he stopped loving you years ago." Her words were a blade, slicing through the last threads of my restraint. I felt the sting, the raw truth of how far Richard had drifted, but I didn't flinch. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on hers, my voice cold as ice. "I'm not here to argue about Richard. I'm here for what's mine. Every cent you took, every brick in this house, it's mine. And I'm taking it back." Dahlia laughed, a sharp, mocking sound that echoed in the quiet room. "You think you scare me? You're nothing, Judith, just a woman who gave up her life for a man who didn't want her." She stood, her hands on her hips, her confidence radiating like heat. "Go ahead, try to take it. You'll lose." I stood too, matching her height, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "I don't need to scare you, Dahlia. The law will handle that." I gathered the papers, my movements slow, deliberate. "I earned every dollar you spent. You're not a queen, you're a thief, and your time's up." Her face twisted, her lips curling into a sneer. As I walked to the door, her voice followed, sharp and venomous. "He chose me, Judith. You're the one who's nothing." The words hung in the air, heavy with her arrogance, but they didn't stop me. I paused at the threshold, the cool air of the porch brushing my face, and turned to face her one last time. "I'm the one who built this," I said, my voice low, unyielding. "You just lived in it. Enjoy it while it lasts." I stepped outside, the door clicking shut behind me, the geraniums swaying in the breeze. My hands shook as I gripped the folder, but my steps were firm. Dahlia thought she'd won, that her taunts had broken me. She was wrong. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The drive back from Dahlia's house left me hollow, her words echoing like a bitter refrain. "He chose me, Judith. You're nothing." The Ohio dusk painted the sky in bruised purples, the air heavy with the scent of rain-soaked fields. My hands gripped the steering wheel, the leather cool under my palms, but inside, a fire burned. Quiet, steady, unyielding. Dahlia thought she'd won, that her taunts had broken me, but she'd misjudged the woman she'd stolen from. I wasn't nothing. I was the one who'd built their world, and I'd be the one to tear it down. What would happen when their perfect facade finally cracked? Back home, the silence was deafening. Richard avoided me, his eyes darting away whenever I entered a room, his excuses for errands growing thinner. The divorce papers still sat on the coffee table, untouched, a silent challenge he refused to face. I let him stew, my focus now on the legal battle ahead. Margaret, my lawyer, was gathering evidence, building a case as airtight as the lock on my study drawer, but the ripples of my confrontation with Dahlia were already spreading, and they were about to hit Ethan's family like a tidal wave. It started with a phone call late one evening. The house was dark, the only light coming from the flickering TV I wasn't watching. The air smelled of the chamomile tea I'd brewed to calm my nerves, its steam curling in the quiet. My phone buzzed, Claire's name flashing on the screen. My daughter-in-law's voice was usually soft, measured, but tonight it cracked, raw with desperation. "Judith," she said, her words tumbling out, "I can't do this anymore. It's a nightmare here." I sat up, the tea forgotten. "Claire, slow down. What's going on?" Her breath hitched, a sob breaking through. "Dahlia and her son Jacob, they moved in with us. Ethan thought it would help, that it was temporary, but it's chaos. He's awful. He breaks things, yells at Noah, eats everything in the house. Noah's scared, Judith. He won't sleep. And Ethan, he just lets it happen." Her voice trembled, heavy with exhaustion. "This isn't a family anymore. It's a war zone." My heart sank, a mix of grief and fury. Ethan, my son, the boy I'd raised to stand tall, was letting his home crumble to appease his father's mistress. I pictured Noah, my 8-year-old grandson, his wide eyes and shy smile, now hiding in fear. The image twisted in my gut, but Claire's next words hit harder. "Ethan keeps saying you're the problem," she whispered, "that you're tearing the family apart with the divorce. But I see it now, Judith. You were the one holding us together." Her words were a knife, slicing through the love I'd clung to for Ethan. I'd raised him, sacrificed for him, believed in him, and now he'd chosen his father's lies over me. The living room felt colder, the shadows deeper, the chamomile's sweetness turning bitter on my tongue. I closed my eyes, steadying my breath. "Claire," I said, my voice calm but firm, "you don't deserve this. Noah doesn't deserve this. But I can't fix it for you." There was a pause, her breathing ragged. "I know," she said finally, her voice small. I thought you'd understand." "I do," I said, softer now. "But Ethan made his choice. You need to make yours." I hung up, the phone heavy in my hand. The TV droned on, some late-night commercial about miracle cleaners, its cheerfulness jarring against the ache in my chest. I thought of Ethan as a boy, his laughter filling this house, his small hand in mine as we walked to the park. Had I lost him to Richard's betrayal too? Or had he chosen to turn away, blind to the truth I was fighting for? The next day, Claire called again, her voice steadier but still frayed. "Noah had a meltdown at school," she said. "Jacob took his favorite toy and broke it. Ethan yelled at Noah for crying, said he needs to toughen up. I can't stay here, Judith, I can't." Her words trembled, a mother's heart breaking for her child. I wanted to rush to her, to scoop Noah up and shield him from the chaos. But I stopped myself. I'd spent decades fixing other people's messes, carrying their burdens while mine grew heavier. Not anymore. "Claire," I said, my voice low but firm, "you need to decide what's best for you and Noah. I've done enough for this family. It's time for Ethan to face the consequences of his choices." I hung up, the silence of the house pressing in again. The air felt thick, heavy with the scent of the pine cleaner I'd used that morning, a futile attempt to scrub away the stain of betrayal. I stood at the kitchen window, staring out at the backyard, the grass browning in the late autumn chill. The swing set Noah loved stood still, its chains rusted from neglect. This house, this life, it had been my anchor, my purpose. Now it felt like a museum of a past I no longer recognized. Claire's call was a mirror reflecting the truth I'd been avoiding. Ethan's loyalty lay with Richard, with Dahlia, with the lies they'd spun. They'd pushed me out, blamed me, while their own world unraveled. And now, they wanted me to step back in, to clean up the mess they'd made, but I was done being their savior. As I turned from the window, my resolve hardened. The legal fight was coming, and with it, the chance to reclaim what was mine. But this wasn't just about money or houses. It was about breaking free from the chains of a family that had taken me for granted. Let them crumble. I'd build something new, something that belonged to me alone. The house felt like a stranger's now, its walls holding echoes of a life I no longer claimed. I moved through my days with purpose, meeting with Margaret to finalize the lawsuit, organizing evidence like a general preparing for battle. Richard was a ghost in his own home, his presence fleeting, his excuses flimsier with each passing day. I didn't care. My focus was on the courtroom, on justice. But then a call shattered the calm I'd built. What happens when the man who betrayed you has nothing left to lose? It was Ethan, his voice jagged with panic, the kind I hadn't heard since he was a boy lost in a storm. "Mom," he said, the word trembling. "Dad's in the hospital. He had a stroke. You need to come." The line crackled, his breathing heavy, as if he were running from something he couldn't escape. My heart lurched, not with love, but with a strange, hollow reflex, a memory of the life we'd shared. I gripped the phone, the kitchen around me blurring, the scent of fresh coffee suddenly sharp and bitter. "What happened?" I asked, my voice steady despite the churn in my gut. "It's bad," Ethan said, his words tumbling over each other. "Dahlia, she and Jacob took everything. Jewelry, electronics, even his wallet. They left him on the floor, Mom. He was alone when it happened." His voice broke, a sob swallowing the rest. "Please, just come." I stood frozen, the phone cold against my ear. The kitchen clock ticked, each second a hammer on my resolve. Dahlia had fled, stripping Richard bare the moment he faltered. The irony was almost poetic. She'd bled him dry, just as she'd done to me for 30 years. But Ethan's plea, his desperation, stirred something deeper. Not pity, not forgiveness, but a need to see the wreckage of the man who'd shattered our family. The hospital was an hour away, the drive a blur of gray highways and skeletal trees. The air inside the car smelled of stale mints and the faint leather of the seats, grounding me as my mind churned. I thought of Richard's smile in those photos with Dahlia, the ease in his eyes I'd never seen turned toward me. Had he ever loved me, or was I always just the means to an end? The question lingered, unanswered, as I pulled into the parking lot, the hospital's stark white walls looming under a leaden sky. Inside, the air was thick with antiseptic and the low hum of machines. Ethan met me in the hallway, his face haggard, his eyes red-rimmed. "He's in there," he said, pointing to a room down the corridor. "He's not good." His voice cracked, but I didn't reach for him. The boy I'd raised was a man now, one who'd chosen his father's lies over me. I nodded, brushing past him, my steps deliberate, the linoleum cool under my shoes. Richard lay in the hospital bed, a shadow of the man I'd married. His hair was fully white now, his skin ashen, his hands trembling on the thin blanket. Tubes snaked from his arm, and the monitor beside him beeped in a steady, relentless rhythm. His eyes, once sharp with charm, were dull, brimming with tears as they found me. "Judith," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper, each word a struggle. "I'm sorry." The word hung in the air, fragile and useless. I stood at the foot of the bed, my arms crossed, the antiseptic smell stinging my nose. I'd waited decades for that apology, dreamed of it in moments of doubt. But now, it was nothing, just a sound from a broken man, too late to mean anything. I thought of the nights I'd lain awake, wondering why we never had enough, why he was always handling things. I thought of Dahlia's house, her son's smile, the life they'd built on my labor, and I felt nothing for the man before me. "Judith," he tried again, his hand inching toward me, trembling. "I didn't mean... I thought I was helping her." I stepped back, out of reach, my voice cold and unyielding. "You didn't help her, Richard. You stole from me, from Ethan, from our family." I gestured to the room, the sterile walls, the empty chair beside him. "And now look at you. She took what was left and ran. You're alone because you chose her over us." His face crumpled, tears spilling down his cheeks, but I didn't soften. The The monitor's beeping filled the silence, a metronome to his regret. I thought of the years I'd spent loving him, trusting him, believing in a future he'd never intended to share. I thought of Ethan, standing outside, begging me to fix what he'd helped break. They'd both pushed me away, and now they wanted me to pick up the pieces. But I was done. "There's nothing left to say, Richard," I said, my voice steady, final. "You made your choice. Live with it." I turned, my footsteps echoing in the small room, the antiseptic air clinging to my skin. His voice followed, weak and desperate. "Judith, please," but I didn't look back. The door closed behind me, a soft click that felt like the end of a chapter I'd outgrown. Ethan was waiting in the hall, his shoulders slumped, his face a mask of guilt and fear. "Mom," he said, stepping toward me. "He needs us. He's got no one else." I met his eyes, the boy I'd loved now a stranger. "He had us," I said, my voice low, cutting. "He chose differently, and so did you." I walked past him, the hospital's fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the weight of my decision settling like armor. Richard's fall was his own making, and I wouldn't carry it for him. Richard's hospital room faded into memory, his tearful apology nothing but a hollow echo. I didn't linger on it. My focus was razor-sharp now, honed by 30 years of betrayal and a fire that refused to dim. The courtroom loomed ahead, a battlefield where I'd reclaim what was mine. Dahlia and Richard thought they could outrun the truth, but I'd built my case brick by brick, and today it would shatter their world. What happens when the law strips away every lie they've hidden behind? The morning of the trial, I woke before dawn. The house was silent, the air heavy with the scent of rain-soaked earth from a storm that had passed in the night. I stood at my bedroom window, the Ohio skyline a blur of gray and gold, my reflection faint in the glass. The woman staring back wasn't the naive wife who'd trusted Richard, nor the mother who'd begged Ethan to see her. She was Judith Carter, 60 years old, unyielding, ready to fight. I dressed carefully, a navy blazer, crisp white blouse, my hair pulled back in a tight bun. Each movement was deliberate, a ritual to armor myself for the day ahead. The courthouse in Columbus was a hulking stone building, its steps worn smooth by decades of justice sought and won. Inside, the air smelled of polished wood and old paper, the hum of voices muted by the weight of the moment. I sat beside Margaret, my lawyer, her briefcase open on the table, stacks of evidence neatly arranged. Bank statements, the forged deed, the investigators' photos, Richard's meticulous ledgers. Every page was a piece of my life, stolen and now reclaimed. My hands rested in my lap, steady, the faint tremor of nerves buried deep. Across the room, Dahlia sat with her lawyer, her auburn hair swept into an elegant twist, her face a mask of calm confidence. She wore a pale green dress, demure and calculated, as if she could charm her way out of this. Richard was there too, slumped in a wheelchair, his face gaunt from the stroke, his eyes avoiding mine. Ethan stood behind them, his jaw tight, his gaze flickering between his father and me. He'd chosen their side, even now. The betrayal stung, but I pushed it down. This wasn't about him anymore. It was about me. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair, called the room to order. Margaret stood, her voice clear and commanding as she laid out our case. For 30 years, she said, Judith Carter's earnings were siphoned without her knowledge, funneled to Dahlia Rose through fraudulent transactions and forged signatures. The evidence is undeniable. A house purchased with Mrs. Carter's funds, monthly withdrawals totaling millions, all orchestrated by Richard Carter in breach of his fiduciary duty. She presented the documents one by one, each page a nail in their defense. I watched Dahlia's face as Margaret spoke. Her smile faltered, her fingers twisting the hem of her dress. Richard stared at the floor, his hands trembling in his lap. Ethan shifted, his eyes darting to me, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. The courtroom was quiet, the only sound the rustle of papers and the judge's pen scratching notes. The air felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks, the scent of Margaret's lavender perfume sharp against the musty wood. Dahlia's lawyer tried to counter, claiming the money was a gift from Richard, that Dahlia had no knowledge of its source. But Margaret was relentless, producing Richard's ledgers, the investigator's report, even a recorded conversation where Richard admitted to helping Dahlia. The evidence was a tidal wave, and their defense crumbled under its weight. Dahlia's composure cracked, her lips trembling as she leaned toward her lawyer, whispering frantically. Richard's head bowed lower, his shoulders shaking. When the judge spoke, her voice was measured, final. The court finds clear evidence of financial fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. The assets funded by Judith Carter's earnings, including the property under Home Nest Holdings and the unauthorized withdrawals, are to be returned in full. The total restitution owed is $135 million. She paused, her eyes sweeping the room. This court will not tolerate deception cloaked in trust. Dahlia's gasp cut through the silence, her hands flying to her mouth. "You can't take everything," she cried, her voice shrill, her facade shattering. "This is my life." Her lawyer tried to quiet her, but she pushed him away, her eyes wild as they locked on me. "You're a monster, Judith! You want to ruin us!" I met her gaze, my face calm, my voice steady as I leaned forward slightly. "I'm not taking anything, Dahlia. I'm reclaiming what's mine." The words were quiet but carried the weight of 30 years. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every dream I'd buried for a family that wasn't real. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath, the air thick with the finality of my victory. Richard didn't look up, his hands clenched in his lap, his silence louder than any apology. Ethan stared at me, his face pale, his loyalty to his father now a chain dragging him down. The judge's gavel fell, a sharp crack that echoed like a door slamming shut. I stood smoothing my blazer, the wood-polish scent lingering as I gathered my things. Margaret gave me a nod, her eyes glinting with quiet pride. "You did it," she whispered. I stepped out of the courtroom, the weight of the verdict settling over me. Not as triumph, not yet, but as freedom. The hallway was cool, the marble floor reflecting the light from high windows. My heels clicked with each step, a rhythm of resolve. Dahlia's outburst, Richard's defeat, Ethan's silence. They were behind me now, pieces of a past I was leaving behind. But the fight wasn't over. They'd lost the battle, but their world was still crumbling. The courtroom victory was mine, but it didn't fill the emptiness that followed. The $135 million restitution was a number, not a salve for 30 years of betrayal. I stood in my Ohio home, the silence louder than ever, the air heavy with the scent of dust and the faint lavender of a candle long burned out. The divorce papers were signed, the house in Canton seized, Dahlia's world dismantled. Yet as I looked at the bare walls where family photos once hung, I felt no triumph, only the weight of a life rebuilt on my terms. What does it mean to win when the family you fought for is gone? I walked through the house, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floor. The kitchen, once alive with Ethan's laughter and Noah's sticky fingerprints, was now a museum of memories I couldn't touch. The countertop gleamed, untouched by the chaos of family dinners, its cool surface reflecting the gray light of a November afternoon. I paused at the sink, my fingers tracing the edge, remembering the nights I'd stood here, washing dishes while Richard promised a future we'd never share. Those promises were ash now, scattered by the truth I'd uncovered. Ethan called that evening, his voice a mix of defiance and despair. "Mom," he said, the words strained, as if it cost him to say it. "You got what you wanted. Dad's broken, Dahlia's gone, and Claire, she took Noah and left me. Are you happy now?" His accusation cut, sharp and raw, but it was the pain beneath it that lingered, a boy lost in the wreckage of his own choices. I stood by the living room window, the phone cold against my ear, the backyard beyond the glass barren and still. The swing set Noah loved creaked in the wind, its chains rusted, a relic of a past I couldn't reclaim. "Ethan," I said, my voice steady but softer than I meant it to be, "I didn't want this. I wanted our family, but you chose your father's lies over me. You let Dahlia and Jacob destroy your home, and you blamed me for it." He was silent, his breathing ragged. I could almost see him, his broad shoulders slumped, his eyes the same hazel as mine, searching for someone to save him. But I'd spent decades saving others, pouring myself into a family that took me for granted. I was done. "You're my son," I continued, the words heavy with truth. "But I can't carry your mistakes. You need to face them." "I don't know how," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Everything's gone, Mom. I've got nothing left." The ache in his words stirred the mother in me, the part that wanted to rush to him, to hold him as I had when he was small. But I stayed still, the window pane cool against my hand, the scent of rain-soaked earth seeping through a crack. "You've got yourself, Ethan," I said. "That's enough to start over. But it's your choice now, not mine." I hung up, the click of the phone final, like a door closing on the life I'd tried to hold together. Days later, I learned the rest. Richard was in a care facility, his health too fragile for the world he'd built to collapse around him. Dahlia and Jacob had vanished, the house in Canton sold to cover my restitution, their belongings auctioned off to strangers. Ethan was alone, renting a small apartment, his marriage over, his son gone. The family I'd fought for was fractured beyond repair, each piece scattered by the truth I'd forced into the light. I sat in the study, the desk now clear except for a single photo, me and Noah laughing at a park 3 summers ago, his ice cream smeared face pressed against mine. The frame was chipped, the glass smudged, but it was the only piece of the past I kept. The room smelled of old books and the faint citrus of the cleaner I'd used that morning, a ritual to reclaim the space as mine. I traced Noah's smile with my finger, my heart twisting. I'd won the money, the house, the justice, but I'd lost the boy who'd called me grandma with a grin. The victory was hollow, a kingdom of one. I thought of Dahlia's taunts, Richard's apologies, Ethan's anger, all of them clinging to a world they'd built on my labor. They'd lost everything just as I had, but I was still standing, my roots deep, my will unbroken. The restitution check sat in my bank account, a fortune I hadn't yet touched. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the woman I'd become, the one who'd faced the fire and walked through it. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the room in soft amber, I leaned back in my chair, the wood creaking under my weight. The silence wasn't oppressive now. It was mine, a canvas for the life I'd build next. Ethan might find his way, or he might not. Richard and Dahlia would fade into their own regrets, but I was free, unbound by their choices, their lies. The Ohio winter settled in, sharp and unyielding, but it didn't touch me the way it once had. My house, once a cage of memories, was now a sanctuary, its walls stripped of the past and painted anew. The air smelled of fresh paint and the cedar of a new bookshelf I'd built myself, a quiet act of reclaiming my space. The restitution money sat in my account, a lifeline I'd earned, but it was the freedom it represented that mattered most. What does it mean to live for yourself after a lifetime of giving to others? I sold the house in the spring, trading the sprawling Ohio suburb for a small cottage on the coast of Maine. The decision came easily, like shedding a skin that no longer fit. The moving truck rumbled away, carrying only what I chose to keep. A few books, Noah's photo, a quilt my mother had made. The rest, Richard's ledgers, the furniture we'd bought together, the weight of 30 years, I left behind. The cottage was modest, its white clapboard weathered by salt air, its windows framing the Atlantic's endless gray. The first night I stood on the porch, the wind carrying the briny scent of the sea, and felt something new, peace. I started small, building a life that was mine alone. Mornings were for coffee on the porch, the mug warm in my hands as gulls cried overhead. I joined a local book club, my voice steady as I shared thoughts I'd once kept quiet, my laughter surprising even me. Afternoons I gardened, my fingers deep in the cool earth, coaxing life from seeds I'd planted. The soil smelled of promise, of beginnings I hadn't dared dream of in Ohio. Each flower that bloomed felt like a victory, a testament to the woman I was becoming. Noah's photo sat on the mantel, his smile a quiet ache. I wrote to Claire, short letters sent to her new address in Boston, asking about him, offering stories of my garden, my new life. She wrote back, her words cautious but warm, describing Noah's love for soccer, his shy grin when he scored a goal. "He misses you," she wrote once, and I held the letter to my chest, the paper crinkling, the sea's roar outside matching the swell in my heart. I didn't push for more, not yet. Claire and Noah needed time, and I'd learned to let go of what I couldn't control. Ethan was a different story. His calls were rare, his voice heavy with the weight of his choices. He'd moved to a small town in Indiana, working odd jobs, living alone. "I'm trying, Mom," he said once, the words rough, like they'd been dragged from him. "I know I messed up." I listened, my heart torn between the boy I'd loved and the man who'd turned away. "Keep trying," I told him, my voice firm but not unkind. "That's all you can do." I hung up, the cottage quiet except for the creak of the floorboards, the scent of lavender from a candle I'd lit. I didn't hate him, but I didn't owe him absolution. That was his to earn. Richard was a shadow now, a name in a care facility's records. Dahlia and Jacob had faded too, their lives unraveling without my money to prop them up. I didn't dwell on them. Their kingdom was gone, and mine was just beginning. The restitution funded my move, my cottage, my freedom, but it was my choices that shaped what came next. I enrolled in an art class, my hands trembling as I held a brush, painting the ocean's churn in bold blues and grays. The canvas smelled of linseed oil, its texture alive under my fingers, each stroke a piece of myself I'd rediscovered. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery pinks, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine, its tartness sharp on my tongue. The waves crashed below, a steady rhythm that matched my breath. I thought of the woman I'd been, Judith, the wife, the mother, the fool who'd trusted blindly. She was gone, not buried but transformed, her strength carried forward into this new life. The betrayal had broken me, but it had also set me free. I raised my glass to the sea, a silent toast to the years ahead. The air was cool, laced with salt and the faint sweetness of blooming jasmine from my garden. The stars began to emerge, faint at first, then bright against the deepening blue. This was my kingdom now, built not on sacrifice but on choice, on the life I'd claimed for myself. I was 61, with decades left to live, to love, to grow, and for the first time, I was enough.